So for today, we ended up with 64 entries. Because we love you guys so much, we added to that prize pool quite a bit, and with a dual qualifier finishing in the money, we're going to pay out over $86,000. So 64,000 entry fees, we added to it significantly. So third place finisher is going to get that Pegasus World Cup Betting Championship entry plus $4,200 in prize money with a bankroll of $13,600. Joji Manjuban. All right, second place finisher is going to get the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge entry, $6,000 prize with a bankroll of $14,406. Vic Stauffer. And our winner, who made a big rally in the last race and is also won a Santa Anita contest recently, so he's very familiar with this position on top of the leaderboard. He's going to get the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge entry and $15,000 in prize money with a bankroll of $18,740. Jim Bennett. Wow.
You want to talk about the sun's going to be on your face, though?
Well, let's go where it's not. I'm better in the shadows.
Let's do that.
I lived my whole life in the shadows. I'm comfortable.
We were talking a little bit about the strategy, because how much did you have going into the last race again?
I had just a taste over 13,000.
Okay, and the leader had.
And I was in third place.
You're in second or third?
I was in second. My bad.
Yeah.
My bad. I was in second.
Yeah, and the leader only had you by a few $100.
$48.
$48. So. The good news is when you're in second, you get to bet, because if you're in first, most of the time you tend to want to sit, but that usually only pans out probably less than 30% of the time. So you had the power to be able to bet like up to, what, 5,000 between you and the third place horse or person, right?
The difference in this tournament, the difference between third and fourth is monumental. Not even so much because of prize money, but because of the seats. The NHC seat, they say, is worth $3,500. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. And the NHC, although a great tournament, is a crapshoot, because you've got 700 people there, and somebody is going to pick 4 or 5 limit horses. And good for them.
What do you think the probability of winning the NHC is?
I think I make myself the favorite. I think I'll win.
Yeah,
so.
but what do you put yourself in? What's your probability?
The line?
Yeah, what's the line?
30 to 1.
30 to 1, okay.
3%. Now, I can tell you that the Treasure Island will list me more at $125. So the truth is probably somewhere in between.
So you should be betting on yourself in the Treasure Island pool too.
If I think I'm 30 to 1, yeah. But I got a lot of confidence in myself. And the thing about a tournament like the NHC is, with me, I either play like I've never been to the racetrack, or I play like the results are preordained. I just, when I get hot, I'll go $18 winner, $22 winner, $31 winner, $9 winner, like it's easy. When I'm not, I seem like a complete buffoon, and I don't have any idea, and I can go 10, 12 races, I can go 10, 12 days and not pick a winner. So for the NHC, that kind of ability to get really white hot is what you have to be able to do. So I always like my chances. Any tournament I go into, I don't think that's being arrogant. I don't think it's being flippant. I think it's a function of doing the work and making the right bets. It's not about picking winners. It's not about cash and tickets. It's about making the right bet, the correct bet. And
you're a bigger fan of the cash games than the mythical games?
No doubt.
Is that right?
I mean, my biggest score today was a $20 daily double. We bet thousands upon thousands of dollars. My biggest score, the one that I got the most money back on, was a $20 daily double. They paid $596.
Nice.
For 20. For 2.
What were the horses, if you don't mind me asking?
It was a Hollendorfer daily double. It was Sheer Flattery, who won at 25 to 1, and then it was the 2 horse down the hill, I want to say Making Grades or something like that. He won by a radical quarter of an inch. If he doesn't win, I probably don't finish anywhere close, because then I would have had to probably structure my bets a little bit different. And sometimes you win the photos and sometimes you don't. You never forget the ones that you never remember the ones you win. You only remember the ones you lose. But I'll remember that one because it probably gave me my best chance to win.
So let's go back to, you're in second place. You have to decide how much to bet. given the prize, you want to make sure you hold on to that seat, which is worth 10K. 12K, right? And so now you're sitting in third most likely no matter what, but you could stand to make an additional maybe 10 to 15K if you're hitting the last race. So how much is it really? How much are you willing to bet in that last race to get that extra 12 to 15K? Is really the question that's going through your mind, right?
It is the question going through my mind. I have to tell you that in this particular race, I really thought it was probably going to be chalky. And when you're in front in a tournament, that's a very good thing. It's like when American Anthem won. That's a very, very good thing. When a 2 to 5 shot wins, especially with the elite players that we have. So I knew I had to bet something. I didn't want to bet an amount that would cause me, if everybody stood pat, that would cause me to be out of the top 3. Because we were talking about the difference between 4th and 3rd. The NHC spot is worth $3,500, and that's a little bit of a stretch, but let's call it that. Yeah. The Pegasus World Cup spot is worth $12,000. Yeah. So by not betting, I think I'm making myself a pretty big favorite to stay in getting that $12,000. There is prize money for 2nd and 3rd, and of course 1st, but at the end of the day, I bet $900. That's what I bet. And I ended up with a $200 exacta that paid $11. So I won a few dollars in the last race. As it turned out, it got me from second. From second, it stayed in second because the guy was in front of me evidently didn't bet the last race. Right. The thing that really makes me happy and comfortable is there's no scenario where I win the tournament because the winner had 18 dimes. There's no way I could have bet it. There's no way that I would have bet it. There's no way that I'd have been willing to bet it to try to beat him. He got 18 dimes. Good on him. Well done. So I bet the last race perfectly. I won $1,400 more real dollars. It moved me up a position. It secured the Pegasus. So I just couldn't be happier. I mean, you can't win them all. Sometimes I'm going to make bets in the last race that are designed to either win the tournament or finish out of the money. But in this particular case, that's not the way I played it. In retrospect, going into the last race, I had a feeling. My cap was that it would be the favorite of the second choice, the second choice of the favorite. So in retrospect, finding out now that the winner ended up with $18,000, I was never going to be able to bet enough money to be able to win, to beat him. And so some would say, well, then I was a coward and that I didn't really go for it. But the fact of the matter is there's no chance to bet the way I bet the race and the way I thought it was going to come. I would have had to bet about 40% of my bankroll to beat him. Now, in retrospect, I didn't know what he was going to end up with. But the way it turned out was choice. That was just perfect because it got me to stay in second, and I couldn't have got to 18,000. There's just no way I was going to do that off that result. Now, if I had liked 3 10-to-1 shots, I could very well have gone for it, and maybe would have. Right. And the thing is about this game is if you like a 7-to-2 and an 8-to-5, you should bet a certain amount of money. If you like 3 10-to-1 shots, you should bet 5 times that amount of money. That's what people don't realize. When they look at the board and they say, oh, my horse is 26-to-1, I'll bet less. No. It's the exact opposite. You bet more because it is very difficult to be correct. And the times that you are correct is when you should really get the mother load because there will be many, many times, if you're betting the right horses and making the right plays, that you're going to tear up those tickets. So the times that you are right, you really have to exploit that. In this particular race, there was nothing in my estimation to exploit. And so it turned out, yeah, maybe you could say I bet it like a coward, and in some cases I would have, but in this case I didn't. I bet it like a smart guy and it worked out.
So tapping more into that thinking, what tips do you have for people that are betting in these tournaments? You just gave a few right there. You know, what have you learned from losing and winning? Now you've had an outstanding success. You've finished in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. How many times? What's your track record in the Breeders' Cup?
I played it twice, and I've hit the board both times. Both times that I played the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, I had a horse in front at the top of the stretch, and I was pretty much all in. I wasn't a coward in those ones. I was pretty much all in, California Chrome hangs on and beats Arrogate, I win $1 million bonus.
Oh.
If Collected out finishes Gunrunner, I win $1 million bonus. I was alive twice in a row at the top of the stretch and got the heart pumping, especially with Chrome. When Victor Espinoza looked behind, I thought I was golden for all of the chips. I ran into one of the great horses of our generation in Arrogate. Gunrunner was a deserving winner. I did have that exacted for $3,500, which really, I bet that better than I bet the California Chrome Arrogate race. My wife actually saved me in that race because I pitched Arrogate completely. And if I'd have done that, I'd have lost $50,000 in the race. As it turned out, I had a $750 trifecta that got me back like $14,000. So, tournament play, here is, if I could sit here and talk to you about tournament play for an hour and a half, or if I could sit here and tell you in the next 10 seconds what you must do. The money on your card is chips. It is not dollars. When you see all of these poker tournaments on TV, and you see the guy with the big stack and the guy with the short stack, and the guy with the big stack continues to put the pressure on the guy with the short stack, where he's going to have to win 8 in a row or 9 in a row, and the guy with the big stack can overcome even a couple of bad beats. Tournament play in horse racing is exactly like that. And so you can't. I had a guy come up to me at the end of the Belmont tournament this year, and he said, I got 14,000 going in. It was 10,000 to play. I got 14,000 going in, but I put it on my credit card, and I'm paying for my kids' tuition. And I said, you are a moron. What are you talking about? I said, you have to take a shot. I said, what about the 2,500 that came off the top before you ever started playing? And your bankroll was 7,500. You have to understand, you can't just give that away. That basically means the take on all of the races is 40%. Are you out of your skull? And he said, well, what should I do? I don't know. And I said, get away from me, because let me know the next tournament you want to come to, because I would be more than happy to send a limousine for you, because you don't get it. It's chips. You have to treat it. Now, it's hard to do. You, Christian, you know how to do it. And the good players do. But you can't think of it as money. You have to think of it as bargaining chips to be able to cash for the money. That's what's most important. If I could say nothing else about tournament play, it would be that.
Right. Okay. That's good advice. I definitely think most people are torn between the idea of, do I bet a certain amount like I normally do, and if I get to that, let's say double, triple, quadruple my bankroll, then do I just take a small little shot and just try to, have a good day and win it and just maybe make a little bit of money? But they don't realize that in the long run, they're giving away that 20%.
Right off the top.
Right off the top, 25%, right off the top. And there's something about winning a tournament, as you know many times, that's just, it's about the accomplishment of decades.
Yeah.
For both of us, for you a few more than me,
work.
but still, the amount of work it takes, and there's something that's really special about walking away and knowing that you delivered your best and you made 700 to 2,000% in one day. Like,
yeah. Remember Rounders? Of course, everybody
oh
remembers
my God,
Rounders.
one of my favorite movies.
And Matt Damon says to his girlfriend, do you think that these are just the 5 luckiest guys in Las Vegas? Do you think that they just get lucky every day? This is a game where not only must it have skill in handicapping, but now in this day and age of tournaments, it's a game where you have to know how to play tournaments. If you don't do that, and that's something that comes with more and more experience in playing. And then you gotta be fearless. You have to understand that the only way you're really going, because there's going to be a whole bunch of tournaments where you end up with nothing.
Yep.
And you actually should.
Yeah, the math is there.
The math is there. So you have to be able to supersede those nothings with a big score. And tournament play, as you play more and more, and people are going to start really loving tournaments. And if you can ever start playing cash money tournaments online, it's going to be so great.
Yeah.
It'll be great for guys like us.
They're
but it'll be
starting
great. Yeah, I know.
They're starting to do more. I know that ExpressBet is doing a couple, and then I hear through the whispers that maybe Naira is going to have something. Let's talk about the rules of the tournaments here. I know there's been a lot of discussion. A lot of tournaments have different formats. I'm pretty vocal about the idea of cash and freedom of choice to try to lure in new players and to give people the ability to do whatever they want for the most part, except, maybe limiting superfectas and some of the horizontal bets potentially. I'm still exploring what I think is the optimal level. I think it's a discussion that requires everyone's input, that everyone should chip in and have a say, and having an organized say around it to try to determine what's really going to work. And I think every tournament can have its own set of rules, right? You don't have to have the same rules for everyone, but for the big ones, when you're starting to bet more than $5,000, even $3,000, I like having more freedom because I don't want to be forced into betting things that I don't normally bet. What are your thoughts on the tournament rules from this weekend at Santa Anita?
I think there's a middle ground to that. And for example, in this tournament, see, a tournament by definition, it connotates excellence over a period of time. Many horse racing tournaments are 2 days. This is a one-day tournament. But think of the NCAA, March Madness. You got to go through 7 levels to be able to be crowned king. If you want to play tournaments and if you want to cultivate players and you want to get them to get into tournament strategy, I think there has to be a happy medium. I'm not saying that you have 7 mandatory races where you have to bet 3/4 of your bankroll spread out. I mean, there's a couple of tournaments out there where you have to bet half your bankroll with 1 race to go. That's nuts, and you shouldn't have to do that.
Talking about the Keeneland tournament, right?
I'm talking about the Grade 1 gamble.
Yeah.
I played it.
I don't play it
I played it because Jim Goodman runs such a good show there, and he's such a nice man.
He's a very, very good man, and he does his best. I think it's interesting. That's his choice. And again, we have our choice not to play.
Yeah.
But let's take the Breeders' Cup. So they're coming out with some new rules this year. What are your thoughts on the rules where they're forcing you to bet? I think, is it 7 races on Breeders' Cup Day?
Yeah.
Something like that? 7 or 8 races? Do you like the idea of minimums? Do you think that you should have to bet that many races? Do you think 3 or 4 is good? What's a good number, and how do you make that decision?
I don't think that you should be forced to bet races that you don't want to bet. And there are tournaments out there where that happens. Conversely, I don't think that you should just be able to buy a ticket and take one shot at 111 to one shot, because a lot of us just can't afford to do something like that. And so I do think stack size. That's what happened with all of the collusion in the Breeders' Cup this year. It was all about getting to a stack size that could make them very, very competitive.
You're talking about what Mooney did.
I'm talking about what Mooney did. He took 4 entries and consolidated it into 1, and that gave him a tremendous edge. By the way, in that tournament, after there were complaints about Mooney, and he did collude, and it was proper for him to, and he owned up to it. He manned up, and I really respect that about him. Somebody decided to send in a letter that I cheated because a friend of mine and I handicapped together, have very similar handicapping philosophies, and just happened to bet similar horses throughout the tournament. What a bunch of babies. We didn't cheat. We just handicapped. And if we had bet on some of the similar horses and those horses ran in the toilet, nobody would say that there was any kind of nefarious action. We just handicapped well. And those people that said, well, that's not necessarily kosher, pick more winners. That is not colluding. That is not consolidating. And that's the gift that keeps on giving, because I went to another tournament subsequent to the Breeders' Cup and found out that this anonymous person from the Netherlands or wherever had sent in a letter about myself and my friend Paul Hughes betting on the same horses in a few spots in the Breeders' Cup. And now, completely out of the blue, somebody got a hold of that letter and came and gave me a preemptive warning to make sure that I flew right, make sure that I knew the rules. And I'm going to tell you something, any tournament that I play in, I do know the rules. And so this sort of underbelly that's out there, and this group of people who frankly I think are just jealous and can't pick enough winners, they are trying to manipulate the whole system, and that's a very, very scary thing. That's a subversive, backdoor, scary thing. I'm not going to name names. The person that sent the letter made sure that it was 7 times removed from a email in Switzerland, and they knew what they were doing.
So wait, hold on. How does somebody get access to your bets?
I don't know. Well, access to my bets is one thing, because the Breeders' Cup can go through and they can look at it. That's what they did with Barrick's bets. And I finished in the top 10.
But if this individual had access, how would this individual get your bets?
That one I don't know. And however they did it, it wasn't fair. It wasn't right, because they should not know how I play. I mean, even if I didn't have any similar bets with a friend of mine, they shouldn't be able to go back and say, well, how did he arrive on these horses? Because access to my bets in any tournament might show the way to the process that I come up with to bet those horses in subsequent tournaments. So that was a very bad deal, and it wasn't right. And then it was compounded by the fact that I was warned to fly straight in a later tournament.
So who warned you about playing by the rules, or what was that?
That was people that didn't finish as high as I did in the Breeders' Cup.
Okay. Because there's a few people that have been warned to try to play the rules by a certain style, and I think it's interesting how it's rumored that a guy like Pete Fornatel has access to some of the bets from the last year, and he's looking at things, and I'd be interested to see if he's the person you're talking about or whatnot. And obviously you're not trying to name names, but I'm saying it's very interesting to me how there's a small group of people that are working with the Breeders' Cup to try to uncover suspicious betting patterns from last year, and who is giving them the access to this betting information, because it's my understanding that that's the privacy and the property of the Breeders' Cup, and it's not to be fished out and distributed amongst other people in the media and other people that are in the tournaments to try to give them some type of an edge or some type of insight into what people are doing. And it's frankly, we absolutely have to have a proper audit. We need to have the best of the best looking at things over and so forth. But I still, to this day, don't understand, besides the example you just brought up with Moomy, how are we going to prevent collusion? And what is collusion on the Breeders' Cup? So if you have 2 entries and your friend Paul has 2, and if you bet the same horses by chance, or maybe
even
because
not by chance,
or even because you like them, is that illegal for you now to talk about 2 horses you like and bet?
It's 2 good handicappers that are collaborating. Big difference between collaborating and colluding, because if they really want to go out and extrapolate this all the way to the end, Paul was in a position to hit the board in the Breeders' Cup. I was in a position to hit the board in the Breeders' Cup, okay? And there's prize money on hand. We bet virtually the same horse. Now, so we were either going to both move way back or both move up. That can't be considered collusion. Collusion would be to say, okay, you bet this horse, I'll bet that horse, and whichever one of our tickets goes forward, we got 2 for 1. We can move up, and then we'll split up the proceeds. That's not what happened.
Okay, so that's how you would...
I want to make it clear. You brought up Fornatale's name. Yeah. I'm not saying that.
Right.
And I'm not saying that it was or was not anybody specifically. I'm just saying that I have a significant problem with somebody coming to me and saying, we have examined your betting patterns from a tournament where that shouldn't necessarily be available anyway, and then warn me to fly right.
But at some point, how do we protect ourselves as players? So the Breeders' Cup is now publishing picks for the first time in the history of that tournament, right? So we're going to be sharing all this information. And as you know, there are certain players in the tournament that we can point to that are very successful, that have a lot of technologies at their fingertips that are data mining on each of the characteristics of our play. Meaning that if they know you play certain types of horses that might be dropping in class, they're going to get themselves potentially in a tournament against you, and they're going to know the type of horse that you're going to be playing. Do you feel that there's enough in place right now, or what can we do to protect ourselves, given that supposedly some of these picks are going to be coming public?
It's interesting you say that, because if it was simply just following a person to the windows, pari-mutually speaking, then that would really be bad, because that person could cut into your prices. It still is tournament strategy. I was playing in a poker tournament the other day, and they wanted to chop it up 3 ways. And I said, why would I do that? I can outplay you 2 guys. Said, well, that's an arrogant thing to say. I said, and before that, they wanted to chop it up 4 ways, and I said, no, wait a minute. I'm not even thinking about chopping it up 4 ways, because this guy over here is going to donk his chips to the 3 of us, and then we'll decide. If they want to know what my plays is and my philosophies is, something? I don't know what they are. Because good players don't have any strict guidelines. Good players adapt to that wonderful menu that they give you out there every race called the totalizator board. You never know when the public's going to make a mistake, and you never know when you're going to be able to exploit a horse that's 8-1 that you know in your heart should be 5-2. So if they want to try to figure out as soon as they zig, because they know my plays, I'm going to zag, and I'm going to beat them in tournament tactics. So have at it.
Okay, so you're pretty loose on your thoughts there. I'm just a little more concerned that there's a couple of people that have the capabilities to data mine and get even more granular than just this. I'm talking about the accumulation of over 5 or 10 years of data. Obviously, a couple of days, a couple of tournaments isn't going to do it, but in the long run, I've also heard from other horse players, they're not going to play because of that.
I understand.
They don't want anybody knowing anything at all, period, what they do.
Sure, I get that.
And so there's a privacy
for
issue.
even more reasons than strategy. You know, so the one thing that I do know is that you and me and the players that have had some success with these tournaments, we're not going to be able to do it if we keep playing against each other. It's not going to work. So you have to try to expand. You have to try to show people that this can be fun, that it can be lucrative.
I think it might be better to start with looking at the owners and some of the other people that are already in the game that have the money and the bankrolls.
There's something to that, and the owners do have money.
But they're going to need the freedom because they're not going to sit in a room with, as much as I like how we're, attractive old men who have a good head on our shoulders, they want to socialize outside of a room and not stare at a computer screen and have to bet 7 races a day. They're going to want to maybe drop a couple grand on 2 or 3 horses, and if they happen to be doing well in the tournament, maybe they'll take it more seriously. But I think that's the stretch.
But there's a give and take to that. We were talking before about the C word, and that is collusion.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with the other C word, which is collaboration. So, yeah, you and I can play $10,000 tournaments, and we've established ourselves in a good enough manner and want enough to be able to sustain playing in more tournaments. But I don't see any problem whatsoever, and only the guys that can't pick winners are going to have a problem with this. What about get together with 5 guys, and you guys sit at the table, and you all put up $2 grand, and you fight it out all day long? No, it ought to be a 4-1. No, what are you, nuts? And you decide and you collaborate, and then you finally decide amongst your group to go up and punch whatever ticket you see fit to do.
I love it.
And now people can get in for a lot cheaper instead of having to come up with 10,000 and really having it adversely affect you. It's like you can't claim a horse for 25,000, but you can get 10 guys to put up $2,500 and have that same thrill. I have zero problem with anybody that wants to play tournaments and they collaborate. As a matter of fact, that's what handicapping is all about. That's how I learned anything that I've learned in this business. It's by sitting in that grandstand, sitting in that clubhouse, and saying, this is what I think, and having a good guy with a good opinion coming back and saying, no, this is what I think, and you come to a mutual decision.
So let's go through a scenario. Let's say you're in the Breeders' Cup. I'm in first with 100,000. You're in second with 80. Paul's in third with 40.
Yep.
Are you going to be nervous if you're going to bet your 60,000 on a 2-to-1 shot? Paul's going to bet his 40,000 on a 3-to-1 shot, and one of you two wins. Are you going to be nervous that you might get disqualified because you guys are collaborating, which could potentially be construed as collusion in some format? Are you worried about that?
Absolutely not. Because
You're not.
The 2-to-1 shot that I pick has to win.
Right.
The 3-to-1 shot that Paul picks has to win. And oh, by the way, Dr. Paul Elliott Hughes is a renowned orthopedic surgeon. He doesn't need part of my play. And I've spent 40 years in this horse racing business and been very, very blessed and done very well, thank you. We don't share in the proceeds. As a matter of fact, if there's anybody at the start of a tournament whose ass I want to kick more than anybody else, it's my good and great friend Paul. So that's the thing. When people would say, well, okay, Vic, you bet on a 2-to-1 shot and Paul bet on a 3-to-1 shot. Well, you know something? A 6-to-1 shot very well could have won the race. So those of you that are saying, well, you have a vested interest in each other, I got one thing to say to you. Pick more winners. So and then you're not going to say, wow, well, this guy did this guy did this. Because it's like when you have a brother?
Yeah.
When you played one-on-one basketball, who did you want to beat more than anybody else in the world?
Well, my dad.
Okay, same thing though.
Yeah.
Same thing though. And when I play in tournaments with friends like you or like Paul, I want to beat you guys as much as some faceless, nameless guy that I don't know. So
right. But let me ask
if
you,
anybody has a problem with that, remember that 2-to-1 shot that I bet, or the 3-to-1 shot that Paul bet, didn't have to win.
Yeah.
And if they both ran in the toilet, nobody would say anything.
But that's what I'm saying is how are you going to feel comfortable, even though it could be by just mere chance? What if you both bet the same horse in the last race? I'm saying, how are we protected as players from not getting disqualified when there's no legal action that can be taken and disputed against the rules? When you sign up, you actually literally sign your name on that dotted line and say, my life is yours for this tournament. Whatever you want to do is I'm fine with.
The answer to that is you're going to be protected, because if there was ever a more strict microscope on such a thing, there's never going to be a bigger microscope than it was this year from this nameless, faceless person that sent a letter about me and said that Paul and I were collaborating and betting on the same horses. Yes, there were many times, but there were also many times where we bet on different horses. The fact of the matter, and we bet on the same horse in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Right.
If we were working in tandem, we would not have bet on the same horse, because if that horse, and we keyed off collected, if he runs in the tank, then both of our stacks go down. Neither one of us hit the board.
But what I'm saying is that, and this is not this person who's going to review the results, right?
Yeah.
And this team of people who are going to look over.
Yeah.
What happens if by chance you did bet the same horse, or you bet 2 different horses in the last race? I'm saying we need to have a definition of collusion to be safe. And so I'm saying maybe
It's not collusion.
So then what is collusion exactly?
Collusion is, remember earlier in this conversation we were talking about stack size?
Just combining for stack size, that's it?
That's it. That's it. That is collusion. Because if you have a $7,500 bankroll, and I have one, and he has one, and he has one, okay?
Yeah.
That has a certain amount of power at the parimutuel windows.
Yep.
And it has a bigger amount of power, or lack of power, in the standings of a tournament. If you take those 7,500s and they are by themselves and alone, they have a certain amount of oomph. If you take those 4 and combine them,
Yeah.
and now that one ticket is worth 30, it goes up exponentially. It goes up. It's not 4 times as good. It's not 10 times as good. It's 50 times more powerful.
But
that is textbook collusion.
So textbook collusion is what we saw, I guess, by definition of what you're saying in the Breeders' Cup last year with what Moomy did.
Correct.
However, if you took those same situations and you just put them in different races, so if you put $7,500 on 4 different horses at roughly 5 to 7 to 1 in 4 different races, the market's pretty efficient. You're still effectively going to be getting yourself to a large position. And
but you
how?
gotta be right.
But you still got to be right. But I'm saying is, how are we going to
Christian,
know?
the thing is,
how are we
in the-
going to know if people in computers are sitting in New York and in California and other places, and if 6 people happen to be betting 7,500, how are we protected?
You
I'm
still
saying.
have to be right. If you're only going to try it in one race, in a Breeders' Cup race, every race has got 14 horses. You still have to be right. In a race that's colluded, you got to do it in the same race, because you have such an edge. Good handicappers. You're a great handicapper. I'm a good handicapper. If I can only pick one horse in a race, and then I have to consider odds and all of the dynamics that go into that, it's going to be very, very difficult to hit the winner. But give me 4 shots, 4 somewhat equal shots, where I can take my 7,500 and consolidate it into one ticket. Well, I'm good enough that I'm going to be able to do that almost every time. And I'm also going to wait for a race where the advantage of that is even a little bit more likely, like the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So I think good on you. If you have a particular race and you can hit a nice price winner, then your stack's going to go up, and that's terrific. It's when they can do it and they take an edge by virtue of the fact that they can collaborate to have several horses in the same race and consolidate those stacks. That isn't fair. That is cheating, and that's why he was disqualified.